At Easter, my mom mocked me. 33 and still renting. 2 weeks later, my brother called her, voice shaking, "You need to see this. Now." My name is Caleb Monroe. I'm 33 years old, and 8 months ago, my mother stood up at Easter dinner, raised her glass, and informed 29 relatives that I was the only Monroe who still couldn't afford a roof over his head. She said it with a smile, as if it were an innocent comment, not a verdict. At his age, she added, her gaze fixed on me, a guy should at least own something. Laughter spread over the table. Not too loud, Peta, like when you don't want to be implicated but yet don't want to disagree. My father nodded, looking into his wine as if it could offer him instructions. He always agreed without speaking. My oldest brother, Andrew, reclined back in his chair, giving me a half smile, half shrug. The empathetic kind. The kind that says, "I would help you if you helped yourself." "Everyone moves at their own pace," Andrew said loudly enough for the table to hear. "Not all of us figure things out quickly." My mother reached over to squeeze his arm. "You did," she exclaimed proudly. 5 bedrooms and good schools. That is steadiness." I sat there, fork poised above my plate. Food cooling down, felt my face remain calm as something hot and metallic spread under my ribs. Nobody asked me anything. No one expressed concern about how I paid my expenses or why I lived where I did. My existence has already been summed up for them. Edit it. Distribute it. I smiled. I always grinned because she was mistaken. Just not in the way anyone at the table had imagined. 2 weeks later, Andrew stood transfixed at the front gate of my new home. The phone shook so badly in his hand that he had to rest it on his chest. He did not go inside. He did not even ring the bell. He merely stared, dialed, and spoke into the phone, his voice breaking in a way I had never heard before. "Mom, you should see this right now." But that moment was not unexpected. It was 14 years in the making. At the time, my entire life fit into a 480 square foot studio on Portland's east side. One window, thin walls, and a kitchen faucet that dripped every 4 seconds no matter how tightly I turned the handle. When freight vehicles passed on the main road, the glass rattled as if it were about to leave. I didn't hate the place. At 29 I convinced myself that this was simply the expense of starting from scratch. And I mean zero. I worked as a cybersecurity analyst for a mid-size corporation in downtown. After 5 years of jumping between contract employment and temporary responsibilities that seemed to last forever, I finally got a genuine title. The salary was $74,500 before taxes. Monthly payments for student loans were $1,650. I consumed a lot of rice, frozen vegetables, and whatever protein was the cheapest that week. I drove a 2013 Honda Civic with a damaged dashboard and a radio that only worked when you struck a pothole exactly right. I had a spreadsheet on my phone. Groceries, gauze, rent, and savings. It told me just how much I could spend without getting behind. Some individuals consider that restricting. I called it survival. That was the story of my life my mother liked to tell her relatives. Except she always made things sound worse. "Caleb is still renting a little studio," she'd say at family dinners, her voice echoing across the table. "That tech thing he does is so unpredictable. I worry about him." What she did not disclose was why I got student debt in the first place. When I was 19, 2 weeks before starting my freshman year at Oregon State, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table. Her voice was gentle. She practiced how it feels when she has already decided on the outcome. "Your college fund did not survive the market." She claimed it was gone. "I'm so sorry." I cried. She held me. The next morning, she assisted me in completing federal loan papers as if this was standard procedure, as if there had never been another option. Meanwhile, my older brother Andrew's life shifted in the opposite way. By the age of 28, he bought a 5-bedroom mansion on Lake Otsego. I'm married and expecting my first child. When asked how he did it, my mother always recounted the same story. Andrew made a save. She would say he's always been financially savvy. I planned beforehand. At Thanksgiving she'd take guests through his house as if she'd planned it herself, pointing out the fixtures, layout, and backyard. I'd sit at the far end of the table while she lauded his steadiness as a moral accomplishment. "Caleb is still finding his footing," she added, smiling at me. "Everybody moves at a different rate." Andrew nodded compassionately. Sometimes he'd pat my shoulder and say, "You'll get there, man." As if encouragement could replace equal footing. My father never contradicted her. He cut his food carefully and remained quiet. I wholeheartedly believed my mother regarding the college fund. I believed that for many years. I based my adult life on the belief that I was simply unlucky because Andrew had been better prepared. That notion persisted until one phone call on a Wednesday night in October 2023. After that, nothing in my past looked the same again. The call arrived on a Wednesday night in October. I sat on the floor of my studio. I opened my laptop to debug a firewall setting for a customer presentation the next morning. The apartment was silent, save for the faucet. Drizzle, drip, drip. 4-second intervals. I hadn't bothered to correct it. Some things you simply learn to live with. My phone vibrated. Uncle Robert. He never called. We texted on birthdays. That was it. I almost left it to voicemail. Caleb, he said when I picked up. His speech sounded tense, as if he had been walking in circles. I've been debating this for a long time and can't take it any longer. Carrie, what? I inquired. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. Your mother did not lose your college funds. The words had landed, but they did not make sense yet. She withdrew it, he explained. All of it. $47,920. In April you turned 19. I did not speak. I glanced at my laptop's screen, the lines of code blurring together. I was in the bank, Robert continued. I watched as she signed the withdrawal form. I told her that it was wrong. She advised me to mind my own business. Then she didn't talk to me for 2.5 years. The faucet continued to drip on time as if it had a job. The money was transferred directly into her joint account with your father. He stated that Andrew closed on his house 2 weeks later. I slid from the couch to the kitchen floor. Cold tile hit the backs of my legs. The phone pressed firmly against my ear. I did not cry. Something beneath my ribcage suddenly became silent, like a pilot light dying out. You still there? Robert inquired. I'm here. I understand this is a lot, but you deserve to know. Yes, I said. My voice did not sound like mine. I did. Before hanging up, he said one more thing. I preserved the bank statements. Caleb and all of them. Tell me when you're ready. The call went dead. I sat on the floor for a long time afterwards. I did not sleep that night. I laid on my back staring at a water spot on the ceiling, and did the math. I withdrew $48,000 during my senior year. Even with cautious growth, that fund would be worth much more now. However, the money was not the worst part. The toughest aspect was understanding that my mother had not panicked. She had not made an error. She had made a choice. And she'd been telling me lies about it for 14 years. I did not confront her. This astonished me at first. Anger was present, hot, sharp, and ready, yet I could already see how that conversation would unfold frame by frame like a movie I had seen my entire life. If I phoned my mother, she would either deny it, soften it, or cry, causing a misunderstanding. She'd claim Robert was bitter, that he had always despised her, and that he was attempting to poison me against the family. Andrew would defend her without even knowing he was doing so. He'd say things like, Mom would never do that, or, you're exaggerating the situation. My father would sit in his recliner, the TV turned up 3 notches higher than usual, and say nothing. Within 48 hours my mother would have contacted every aunt and cousin to inform them that poor Caleb was in a downward spiral. That work stress was getting to me, and I was acting out because I felt insecure. I would not just lose the debate, I would become the problem. Confrontation gives liars a platform. I lay there that night, staring at the ceiling. I can feel something settling in. Not peace. Clarity. A crisp, cold awareness of how this family operated. If I remained silent, nothing changed. I stayed with the footnote. A cautionary tale. The son who rented and worked in the technology field. If I addressed her, I would lose control of the plot. Neither option propelled me forwards. So around 1:40 a.m., I opened my laptop. I created a spreadsheet. 3 columns. Monthly income, monthly savings, and target. The aim was not modest. It was in the mid-7 figures. I didn't connect any emotion to it. It wasn't vengeance. It was mathematics. I stopped worrying about fairness. Fairness is a theoretical concept. I began thinking about leverage. I determined I was not going to argue my way to respect. I was not going to beg for acknowledgement. I was not going to explain myself to those who gained from misinterpreting me. I planned to develop something so strong that it would not require any defense. I shut down the laptop, set my alarm for 6:15, and fell asleep for the first time that night. I had a presentation in the morning and a much longer plan in the works. The next morning, I put on a clean clothing, drank awful coffee, and went to work as if nothing had happened. That became a pattern. I did not make an announcement. I did not confront anyone. I didn't even tell Uncle Robert that I was ready for the statements yet. I simply showed there and worked silently, relentlessly, and with a level of intensity I had never knew I possessed. There was only one person in the company I trusted. Diane Whitaker, VP of Threat Intelligence. 56. Silver Bob. She wore reading glasses on a chain, like a librarian, and could break down your entire network in 12 minutes. I did not inform her about my family. Not then. I asked one question. What does it take to advance up here? She stared at me over her spectacles for a long time, not evaluating or measuring. You are already doing the work. She said you only had to quit being invisible. She slipped the folder across her desk. A suggestion for conducting an enterprise security audit. Our largest client is a regional hospital network. The previous team leader had quit in the middle of the project. Tight timeline, high visibility and no room for error. This is yours if you want it. She said it was nasty. If it fails, it will be very loud. If it works, those above me will learn your name. I took the folder. My life became consumed with work and discipline throughout the course of the next year. 11-hour days became the norm. 13 wasn't uncommon. I transferred 35% of my paycheck to an investment account, index funds. Nothing spectacular, and I forced myself to forget that money existed. On Sundays, I meal planned chicken and rice. I stopped going out. I discontinued my streaming subscriptions not out of misery, but with intention. Every modest sacrifice has a purpose. Now. At home, the faucet continued to trickle. I allowed it. Nothing changed during family dinners. My mother continued telling everyone I was still renting. Andrew continued nodding compassionately. My father remained quiet. I did not contest the story, thus it remained unchanged. I stopped saying anything about my employment. Not because I was hiding it, but because whenever I discussed employment in the past, my mother dismissed it as if I was talking about a pastime. The last time I told her about a successful project, she'd ask, "Are they going to keep you with that computer stuff?" Within 2 phrases, she had turned the subject to Andrew's backyard remodeling. So I stopped talking. Nobody noticed. The hospital audit was completed on schedule, under budget, and without incident. The client agreed to renew for 3 years. Diane gave me a 2-line email on the final day of the contract. Nice work. Come see me Monday. Diane called me into her office again 13 months later, on a Wednesday night. I assumed that something went wrong. I was mistaken. She promoted me to team leader. Salary rose to $118,000. New badge, floor, and title in the company directory. I did not make a post about it. I did not call my family. I've just updated my spreadsheet. A year may alter everything if you don't spend it justifying yourself. Christmas arrived. As always, Andrew served as the host. His place smelled of cinnamon and fresh paint. He spent $36,000 remodeling his living room. Announced within 5 minutes of our arrival. My mother guided visitors like a docent. Andrew chose the wood himself. Wasn't the kitchen arrangement his idea? This is what planning looks like. Then she found me by the drinks table. Are you still renting that small place? She asked. Yes, Mom. So, at least you're saving, right? Her sympathy was well tuned. Only enough to sting. Andrew appeared around her elbow. You know, Caleb, if you listen to me about real estate, I'll be all right. I'm just trying to help, he responded. You don't need to be defensive. I am not. My mother patted his arm. Your brother acquired this house on his own. That is what a plan looks like. I sipped my water, smiled and said nothing. Later in the corridor, Andrew's wife's husband, Michael Reed, approached me. He seems to have understood the virtue of saying less. Your mother speaks a much, he remarked gently. Do not believe everything. It was the nicest thing anyone in the house said to me all night. My mother's behavior became increasingly aggressive in February. She left a voicemail at a number I did not recognize. This time it's a woman. The voice is pleasant and confident. Hello, Caleb. This is Rachel Collins. Your mother believed we may get along. I work in commercial insurance. I own a property in Beaverton. I deleted it. 20 minutes later, my mother texted. Rachel is a desirable individual. She owns her home outright. Caleb, you're 33. I responded once. I did not ask you to set me up. She responded immediately. I'm trying to help. A man needs steadiness. I closed my phone and returned to work. That night I completed a server migration without any downtime. My team flooded Slack with celebratory emojis. I brewed tea, sat on my studio floor and opened Zillow. Not for Rachel. For me. I was not chasing a house. I was increasing gravity. Everything accelerated 7 months after I first opened Zillow to look. Diane promoted me again to senior manager. This time the salary increased to $152,000, plus a bonus. My investment account, which I had been quietly feeding for the past 2.5 years, had nearly doubled. The spreadsheet I had created at 1:40 a.m. on a cold October night stopped looking theoretical and began to look inevitable. On Saturday mornings I drove alone with coffee in the cup holder, phone on silent, and no music. I did not tell anyone. Not Diane, Uncle Robert, or a single friend. I wasn't seeking approval or advice. I wasn't sure if I was looking for a house yet. I was searching for a feeling. I discovered it on a hillside in West Hills. 5 bedrooms, a wraparound deck that overlooks a valley of Douglas firs. The living room's floor-to-ceiling windows transformed sunset into a copper and amber wall. Hardwood floors that creaked just enough to feel authentic. A stone fireplace. A kitchen island large enough for 6 people to sit without feeling crowded. The listing price was $985,000. I calculated the numbers twice. The third time, I called my financial advisor, went over worst-case scenarios, and stress-tested everything. When I hung up, my hands did not shake. That is how I knew. I called the listing agent and submitted an offer. 4 weeks later I sat in a title office signing my name 52 times. They slid a folder across the table and set a single key on top of it. I picked it up. It felt warm from the agent's hand. I did not call my mother. I did not text Andrew. I did not post anything. I drove directly to the house. The front door opened effortlessly, as if it had been waiting. The rooms inside were enormous and empty. My footsteps echoed on the oak floors. The last of the daylight slid down the far wall and landed on the floor. A quiet acknowledgement. I stood there for a long time, not smiling or celebrating, simply breathing. I moved in on a Saturday in early January. No moving truck, no fanfare, just my Civic packed tightly with what was important: clothes, a laptop, a box of books, and a cast iron skillet that had survived 5 apartments. The house echoed as I walked through it. Sunlight poured through the glass wall, creating long rectangles on the bare floor. Outside, the trees swayed in a cool breeze. I slowly furnished it. First, there's a deep gray couch that you can sink into. Then there was a bed frame and an estate sale kitchen table made of solid maple that was scarred and heavy. I liked the scars. They made it seem earned. One weekend I painted the living room wall behind the fireplace a warm white. 2 coats, sore arms, and paint on the knuckles. I did not mind. The only person I invited over was Diane Whitaker. She stood in the entryway taking in the ceiling. The view. The silence. She remained silent for quite some time. "This is stunning," she said finally. "Does your family know?" "Not yet." She looked at my face, then nodded. "You are not punishing them by keeping this quiet. You are protecting yourself." Maybe. Or maybe I just didn't want to give them something else to criticize. After Diane left that night, I tucked the deed away in my desk drawer. I didn't realize it yet. But the drawer was going to hold more than just paperwork. It was going to contain the truth. I did not tell my family about the house. There was no announcement, no accidental slip, and no social media breadcrumbs for my mother to follow and interpret. The silence was intentional. This time silence didn't mean absence. It was a placement. I was waiting for the appropriate moment to set it down. That moment came during Easter. Andrew hosted, as he always does. There are 22 people under one roof. Kids are on the floor. Adults holding wine glasses and expressing their opinions. My mother moved through the house as if she owned it, narrating every improvement Andrew had made as if she had personally signed the checks. I stayed until dinner. I listened. I smiled when necessary. I left early. That part surprised them. "Caleb always leaves early," my mother said loud enough for the room. "It's just his way." I was halfway into my coat when I turned back. "Actually, Andrew," I said lightly, like it had just occurred to me, "you should come by my place sometime for tea." The room shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. "My place," Andrew repeated. "Yes," I said. "I moved recently. Nothing crazy." My mother frowned. "Moved where?" "It happened fast." I said, "I'll text you the address." Andrew laughed once. Uncertain. "Are you house-sitting or something?" "No." I said, "It's mine." That was the seed. I didn't explain. I didn't elaborate. I didn't defend the statement. I just let it exist. Saturday at 2:30, I added, if you're free. Andrew hesitated. He looked at my mother. She looked back at him, calculating. Something had gone off script and she didn't like not knowing her lines. Sure, he said finally. I'll come. Great, I said. Bring coffee if you want. Or don't. I pulled on my jacket and headed for the door behind me. I could already hear my mother recalibrating. He's probably renting something else, she said quickly. You know how he is. But I caught something else before the door closed. Uncle Robert, sitting in the corner, met my eyes and smiled just once. That week passed slowly. On Saturday morning, I cleaned not because the house was dirty, but because I needed my hands busy. I vacuumed floors that didn't need it. Wiped down a granite island that no one had touched. I set 2 mugs on the kitchen table. At the edge of the counter, she cinched. My phone vibrated. Andrew, on my way. What's the address again? I sent it. A pause. Then another message. West Hills. That's a nice area. I didn't reply. I set the kettle on, arranged the scones, and waited. Andrew arrived at 2:17. I know the time because I was already standing by the window when I heard gravel crunch under his tires. His SUV stopped at the edge of the driveway and just sat there, engine running, visible from the living room. I could see him through the windshield staring at the house like it had violated some internal rule he'd been living by. He didn't get out right away. 45 seconds passed. Then another. Finally, the engine cut. He stepped out. His keys were still in his hand and he looked up at the front of the house. The windows, the deck, the slope of the hill behind it. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. I opened the door before he rang. Hey, I said. You made it. He walked up the path slowly, like the ground might change under his feet. When he stepped inside, he stopped dead in the entryway. The ceiling rose above him. The staircase curved off to the right. Straight ahead, the living room opened into glass and sky. This is, he turned in a slow circle. This is your place. Yeah. He walked forward without taking his shoes off, crossed the living room, put his hand on the stone fireplace like he needed to feel something solid. Then he moved to the glass wall and stared out over the valley. How? He asked finally. I worked. I said, I saved. He laughed once. It came out wrong. Too sharp. No, I mean, how did you afford this? I didn't answer right away. I walked into the kitchen, poured hot water over the tea, and set 2 mugs on the table. I thought you were renting, he said, following me. Mom said you were. I said, now I'm not. He sat down heavily in one of the chairs, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. I watched his fingers start to shake. This doesn't make sense, he said. I mean, I'm the one with the house. The kids. Then he stopped himself. Then he did something I didn't expect. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen like it didn't want to do what he was asking it to. He hit dial anyway. 1 ring. 2. Mom, he said the second she picked up. His voice cracked immediately. You need to come here right now. I heard her voice through the speaker, sharp with alarm. What's wrong? Are you okay? Just come, he said. I'll send the address. He hung up and stared at the table. The steam from the mugs curled between us. You didn't tell anyone, he said quietly. No. Why? I met his eyes. Because I wanted you to see it before you heard about it. That's when it hit him. Not jealousy, not anger, disorientation. The kind that comes when the story you've lived inside your whole life suddenly doesn't fit the room you're standing in. He leaned back in the chair and covered his face with both hands. Outside, the trees moved in the wind. Inside, something foundational was cracking, and my mother was already on her way. My mother arrived in 17 minutes. That's fast, considering she lived across town and it was a Saturday. She must have driven like the house was on fire. I heard her heels before I saw her. Sharp, purposeful clicks on the stone path. My father followed a few steps behind. Slower. Uncertain. Andrew opened the door before I could. Come in, he said. You need to see this. My mother stepped into the entryway and stopped. She didn't speak. Not right away. She took in the ceiling first, then the staircase, then the living room, the wall of glass, the valley stretching out beyond it. Her face went pale, then flushed like her body was trying to decide which reaction was safer. What is this? She asked finally. My house, I said. Welcome. She moved forward, touching things as she went. The back of the couch, the stone of the fireplace, the edge of a bookshelf. She walked to the glass wall and stared out, breathing shallowly. But you never said. Her voice thinned. How could you afford? I'm a senior director at my company, I said evenly. I've been one for a year. My salary and investments covered it. She turned sharply. Since when? Since you stopped asking about my job? My father was still standing in the doorway. He hadn't come any farther in. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. I'm proud of you. Son, he said quietly. It was the first time he'd ever said that to me as an adult. My mother spun toward him. Did you know about this? No, he said. I didn't. Then he did something I'd never seen before. He walked across the room and hugged me. It wasn't brief. It wasn't performative. His arms wrapped around me and stayed there, trembling against my back. He smelled like sawdust and aftershave. Exactly the way he had when I was a kid. When he let go, the room had changed. Andrew was sitting on the edge of the couch now, staring at the floor. My mother stood apart from all of us near the window, hands at her sides. I don't understand, Andrew said suddenly. He looked up at me. How did you save that much? You had student loans. Huge ones. Yes, I said. I did. He frowned. Mom told us both funds were lost in the market. I met his eyes. Yours was not. The air became thin. Andrew turned to face her. What? My mom's jaw tightened. That is ridiculous. Who told you this? I mentioned someone who was there. Uncle Robert. She said his name as if it tasted bitter. Robert has always attempted to tear this family apart. The front door opened. Everyone turned. Uncle Robert stepped inside, wind still blowing through his jacket. He held a plain white envelope. He did not look at me first. He looked at my mother. Hey, he replied calmly. Traffic was difficult. He walked to the kitchen table, placing the envelope between the teapot and the untouched scones. Nobody moved. After a long pause, I opened it. I took out my bank statement and laid it flat on the table. Pacific Northwest Federal Credit Union. I said the custodial account was opened in 2006. Beneficiary, Caleb Monroe. Custodian Evelyn Monroe. I ran my finger down the page. April 9th. $47,920. Full withdrawal. Evelyn Monroe has given her consent. I looked at Andrew. 2 weeks later, your down payment was cleared. Andrew stood up slowly and took up the paper. His gaze shifted back and forth as he read. His lips separated. Mom, he said quietly. You told me it was your savings. I did what was best for the family, she snapped. For me, he said. You did it for me. My father sat down heavily in a chair. His face collapsed inwards. You told me the fund had failed, he said. You showed me a statement. Robert crossed his arms. She showed you the summary. The real one is right there. Her signature is on it. My mother tried one final time to regain control. After everything I've done for you, she told me. I raised you. I fed you. I kept this family together. I nodded. You did. And I'm thankful for what was real. She opened her mouth. I held up one hand, not angry, but firm. But you also stole from me and lied about it for 14 years, I complained. Both can be true. The room became silent. My mother had no scripts left. For the first time in my life, she didn't have an audience. I did not raise my voice. This was the part that surprised everyone. Anger would have made sense. Yelling would have been expected. My mother had survived for decades under the assumption that if things got loud enough, she could redirect them. I was not going to give her that. I'm not asking for my money back, I said. Andrew gave me a sharp look. My father did as well. My mother froze as if she had misheard. I do not need it. I continued. I created this without it. I motioned around the room. Not broadly. Just enough. That does not erase what happened, I stated. However, you cannot claim that this is motivated by greed or resentment. It's about the truth. My mother inhaled, preparing for another defense. I did not let her start. What has changed now, I explained, is the story. I focused on Andrew first. You're not allowed to feel guilty on my behalf, I said. However, you must stop pretending that you earned something on your own when you did not. He nodded once, tightly. He refused to argue because he was ashamed. I then turned to my father. You don't get to be quiet anymore. I said gently. Silence is not neutrality. It's a choice, and it has cost me enough. His eyes lowered. He did not say no. I finally faced my mother. This house isn't a stage, I explained. If you come here, you are a guest, not a narrator. She stared at me with thin lips. You can't tell people I'm struggling when I'm not, I said. You can't rewrite my life to make someone else look better. You do not have the authority to turn me into a warning story or a charity case. Her voice sounded small. I tried to motivate you. No, I replied calmly. You had control over the narrative. The words landed cleanly. Undeniable. I said, I am not going to cut anyone off. However, I am establishing rules. Honesty, no side conversations, no concerned phone calls to family members about my life. I paused. And if those rules don't work for you, I explained, that's fine. You simply won't be here. The teapot clicked gently as it cooled. Nobody argued because there was nothing left to argue over. The fallout did not occur all at once. It moved in the way that truth usually does in families like mine. Quietly, sideways, carried by phone calls that were never meant to travel far. By Sunday night, everyone knew what Andrew had told his wife. She informed her sister. That sister informed her husband. By Monday morning my phone was ringing. Aunt Lorraine comes first. Caleb, she said breathlessly. Your mother informed us that you were struggling. For years we didn't know. I did not correct her tone. I did not need to. I know, I replied. Uncle Harold called next. Kid, why didn't you say anything? There was a pause in the line. A long one. Would you've believed me? I asked. He didn't respond. Cousin Emily texted. I feel ill. I apologize for every time I offered assistance you didn't require. What none of them said, but everyone understood, was that they hadn't simply been misinformed. They had been managed. My mother had long controlled the family narrative and no one questioned it. She had no need for dramatic lies. She used gentle editing, soft framing, and concern rather than accusation. By the time the truth was revealed, it was clear how carefully the story had been maintained. And once broken, it couldn't be fixed. Relatives began calling my mother not to comfort her, but to ask difficult questions. She was unable to redirect questions with a laugh or a change of subject. Why didn't you let us know the fund had been withdrawn? Why did Caleb think it was gone? Why did Andrew believe it was your savings? Her responses were not as effective as they had previously been. She was constantly jealous. Robert is dramatic. I did what I felt was best. None of this mattered. There was a bank statement on my kitchen table with her signature at the end. Ink has the ability to end arguments. The calls slowed and then stopped. Lorraine did not invite her to book club that month. Harold did not ask her to plan the 4th of July cookout. A cousin quietly removed her from the family group chat, which I hadn't been added to in the first place. My mother did not rage. She did not confront anyone. She simply stopped breathing. The telephone stopped ringing. The invitations dried up. Her decades-long authority dissipated without ceremony. Andrew, too, pulled back. This time out of confusion rather than anger. The ground he'd been standing on for his entire adult life had shifted, and he wasn't sure where to put his feet. For the first time, my mother was not the focal point of the room. She was just another person waiting to be called, but no one was dialing. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It had been unfamiliar for weeks. My phone remained mostly silent. There are no checking-in messages disguised as concern. There were no family updates filtered through my mother's voice, only space. At first it seemed like something was missing. Then I realized what was causing it: pressure. Andrew was the first to reach out. He did not call. He texted. Would you like to get coffee sometime? It's just us. We met halfway between our houses, on neutral ground. A small cafe with uneven tables and espresso potent enough to break through denial. He seemed tired. Not the overworked kind. The unraveling kind. I keep replaying it, he said after a long pause. Mom talked about the bank statement as if it were nothing. I nodded. I did not interrupt. I never asked where the money came from. He continued. I really wanted the house. I wanted to feel like I had succeeded. And Mom made it easy to avoid looking too closely. That does not make you evil, I replied. It makes you human. He swallowed. This makes me complicit. We sat with it. Not accusing, not absolving, simply honest. I don't need you to punish yourself, I explained. I just need you to stop pretending that we started from the same place. He nodded once. That was enough for now. A week later, Uncle Robert arrived with a bottle of wine and the same quiet grin he always gave when he knew more than he said. We sat on the deck as the sun set in the valley, turning the trees copper and gray. He said, "Your grandmother would have loved this place." I looked at him. He nodded at Grandma Eleanor. "She's the one who started your college fund with $60 per month from her Social Security check. She told your mother it was for your education. No exceptions." Something in my chest broke open. All those years, I thought no one was looking out for me. Nobody was keeping score. I burst into tears right then. Not out of anger, but out of relief, knowing that even as the story around me was being rewritten, the truth had been planted early and patiently. Robert did not say anything. He simply slid a napkin across the table. Andrew and I began meeting once a month following that. At first it was awkward, but it soon became easier. Not rebuilding the past, but creating something new. I hadn't forgiven my mother yet, but I stopped hearing her voice in my head. And that was the start of healing. Summer arrived quietly. No announcements or milestones were shared in group chats. Days simply stack on top of one another, in the best sense, steady and unremarkable. On a Wednesday morning in July, Diane Whitaker asked me to stay on a Zoom call after everyone else had left. The screen went black except for her square. She adjusted her glasses and smiled as if she knew the answer to a question. "We're restructuring," she explained. "Security operations are conducted across the entire enterprise. I want you to lead it." She did not dress it up. She did not need to. Vice President of Security Operations with a mid-seven-figure portfolio and teams spread across 4 offices. Real authority, not a symbolic one. I accepted. I thanked her. I shut my laptop. That was it. I did not make a post about it. I did not call my family. I did not even inform Andrew right away. Some things feel different when they are yours first. Before anyone else could react to them, the house settled in. Mornings on the deck with coffee and a low fog hanging over the valley. Evenings with the fire lit. The windows cracked just enough to let in the smell of rain and pine. I replaced the dripping faucet. My father and I fixed the loose railing one afternoon without saying much. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He just showed up. My mother called once in late August. I left a voicemail. Her voice seemed smaller than I remembered. "I hear you're doing well," she said. I am glad I did not call her back. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. I was not prepared to let her narrate this chapter, even in quiet. Andrew and I continued our monthly coffees. It's less heavy now. More real. He stopped competing. I stopped bracing. The life I had created did not need to be defended or showcased. It existed whether anyone recognized it or not. And that was the upgrade, not the title, salary, or house on the hill. But the freedom to feel comfortable in my own skin without waiting for permission. I'm sitting in my living room, telling you this. The fire is on. A mug of coffee on the side table has gotten lukewarm because I've been talking for longer than I intended. Outside, the valley is gray-green under low clouds, and the trees are swaying slowly because the wind can't decide what to do. For a long time my mother measured success by square footage. My brother measured it in comparison. My father measured it by maintaining peace, which I discovered is not the same as keeping anyone safe. And for years I lived my life in silence. Not the kind that hides, but the kind that builds. I don't hate my mother. Hate is heavy, and I've already carried enough. I don't hate my brother either. He's trying now, awkwardly and imperfectly. That counts for something. I stopped waiting. Waiting for approval. We are waiting for fairness. Waiting for someone else to tell my life story correctly. I created something they couldn't ignore, but not to punish them. Not to prove them wrong, but because I deserved to live a life that was not predetermined by someone else. If there is one thing I have learned the hard way, it is this. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's all about strategy. You don't have to confront anyone, but you do owe yourself the truth. And boundaries are not walls. These are doors with better locks. If any of that resonated with you, let me know which line hit the hardest in the comments. I read each one.